We begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Yevamos Daf Nun Vav. We begin the second line down at the top of the Amud, where we continue explaining the halacha of a previous Mishnah. We opened up this parak, Habal Yevinta, if someone has deal with the Yevama, we said, whatever it is, and so too the Mishnah said, whether it's Hara, whether it's Gemar Bia, one is going to be Kaina, our Gemara is going to discuss regarding that Kinyan. Shish corresponds to Bekazi Cheskel, to understand Daf Acham, to understand today's Daf, the British Design, B'Shot Tevim, Mitzlachas, and the Barnes, Akint. Some of things we're going to discuss in today's Daf are, to what extent does an inferior Bia acquire Yevama? That's the opening discussion we have in our Gemara. This what's called this Bia Psula. The halacha of a woman married to a deaf kohen in regards to eating truma, because we know that the kohen gives his wife truma. What happens with regarding to a deaf kohen, a cheresh, which that marriage is also inferior. Halacha of a coerced woman married to a Yisrael, what's called an anusa, in regards to the husband, and also regarding the future status of her related to a kohen. And the last discussion of the Gemara is the machlekes in the case of a bas kohen, what's called who anticipates an invalid bia, what's called she's a medis, she's waiting for a marriage, like a Malka and Gadol, in regard to eating truma. So begin the current Daf. As we said in the Mishnah, Habal Yevimta, we said that no matter what type of bia it is, with the Yevama, whether by mistake or with sinful intent or coerced or willingly, either way, or that's the words the Gemara is going to discuss in the Mishnah, whether it was just hara or whether it's gemar bia, either way, one is going to be acquiring this Yevama. Says the Gemara, my comment, what are you acquiring with one of these inferior types of bias? This that you're acquiring the Yevama is machlekes in the Gemara, to what extent is that kidding? So Rav Amay says, kan lakar. He says you acquire the Yevama for all halachas, for everything. And that is, if let's say the Yavam is a kohen, she eats truma right away, even if he goes overseas and he never has a full-fledged bia, it doesn't make a difference. Any one of these bia gruas is going to be a full kinyan in the Yavam. Shmuel says no. It's only kind of a things that are said, as Tais explains, explicitly in the parasha, which in this pasuk of Yevama Yavi Aleha, which is the source of where we learn out, as the Gemara said on Daf Nandal Mid Aleph, Bein b'shagi, bein b'mezi, bein b'oinis, bein b'ratzin, we learn from Yevama Yavi Aleha, from that words. Those that say explicitly in that parasha, those are the things that he's going to acquire, because again, it's a rebirth. You wouldn't have known that you'd be kind of with a bia that's a shagig, or let's say of a nusa or mezi. The Torah is being marbit. So whatever's in that parasha of Yevama Yavi Aleha will be marbit. That's what we're going to include. So what are those things? So Shmuel says that's leirish b'nechsei achiv, that's he inherits his brother's properties, because over there in Devarim Chavei, where we said the pasuk of Yevama Yavi Aleha, is where it says Yaakov Hashem achiv is going to go ahead and take over the property of his brother. And also lafaycha min yibum, it's also going to exempt her from yibum, meaning if let's say this Yavam dies and he has sons from another woman, so then this Yevama will be permitted to marry some other person, what's called moteres l'shuk. Or if let's say he divorces her with a get, she doesn't need chalitza. Or if let's say she had a co-wife, that co-wife is exempt with this bia. So for those things, we're going to say that it's going to work. But for other things that are not explicit in the parsha, for those things, it's not going to work, this bia group. So the Gemara qualifies, there's two ways how the Gemara qualifies this machlekes Rabbi Shloimy. First version is, min hanisuin, from marriage. Meaning, if let's say her first husband that died without any children, she was married to, and the significance of that is, and this says we're only picking this case of regarding eating truma, but really it applies to all the other ones too, is that where she was eating in her first husband's lifetime, because what happens is when a woman is married to a husband, then she eats truma. If she's only engaged, then she doesn't. So when she was married to the first husband, and when he dies, now there's no more kinyan for him and her, for her to continue eating. So, but she had been eating up until now. So then, according to everyone, no one's going to disagree that this inferior bia of the Yavam, who did, let's say, b'shogig, that the halacha is going to be achla, she's going to continue eating truma. Why? Because she was eating truma up until this point from her first husband. So she's going to continue eating even with the bia grew up. Ki pligi, the homachligis is min evis. When she was only engaged to her first husband died without any children, there is a halacha of yibum, from Erison, but that's where we have machlekes. Rav Amar Eichelis. Rav says that she continues to eat. Why? Not continues, she actually eats. He says, what do you mean? The Torah says that having a bia of yibum, even by mistake, is just like when you're doing it deliberate, and therefore you're going to eat. So even though she didn't eat by her first husband, doesn't make a difference. This is like a regular yibum. A yibum, when you do yibum to a woman, she becomes your wife, and therefore she's going to eat truma. Shmuel Abi says no. When did the Torah include is lo'ukmi b'makom bal? Is that the yavam takes over the place of the husband. Meaning, if she was eating truma when the first husband was alive, meaning that when she was married to him, then she's going to eat because of the yavam. But la lume mibal, to make him stronger than the husband, meaning if when the husband was alive, she wasn't eating, because a woman does not eat truma until she comes to the chuppah, until she gets married. Loi. For that we didn't make the yavam stronger. Now Rashi obviously points out that this is specifically this inferior bia, like when you didn't have das for a kinyan. There's b'shaygig, there's ba'inus, whatever it is. But of course, a regular bia, it becomes his regular wife. Of course, she would eat him according to Shmuel. No one's going to say if the first husband was just engaged, but she didn't eat truma. Of course, if you do a regular yibum, she becomes his wife, and of course she would eat. But we're saying for the bia grua, for the inferior bia of that we included shogig kamezid from the words of Yevamos Daf, that's not going to make it better than the first husband. And therefore, if she didn't eat when she was engaged then this inferior bia is not going to make it better, and she won't eat truma according to Shmuel. And says the Gemara, how's the Shmuel tamei? Shmuel goes according to his reasoning mentioned elsewhere. Shmuel said the following teaching. It says, Kol shahabal machal, whatever the husband could make the woman eat, so yavam machal, then the yavam can make her eat. Whatever the husband cannot make her eat because they were only engaged, so yavam ain't a machal. So then the yavam, as Rashi obviously points out again, with this bia grua, with this inferior bia that we're including, but it's not for everything, it's only as far as what the first husband was, then he's not going to feed it. So we see Shmuel the Shutasi says this, that the bia grua is not going to give what the first husband couldn't give. But Nesve, the Gemara asks on Shmuel from the first, from the following Bryce. Bryce says, Bas Yisrael pikachas. If you have a Jewish woman that's sane, that's healthy, that gets engaged to a kohen that's also healthy. Okay. But he didn't get a chance to marry her, and he became a deaf mute. So the halacha is, says the Bryce, the woman will not be able to eat truma from her husband. Why? The Gemara is going to explain later on that the truth is that nisuin of a cheresh really is valid. But they were geyser by the marriage, the nisuin of a cheresh, because of kedushin of a cheresh. The problem with a cheresh is that he doesn't have kinyan. And rabbinically, yeah, we say, but biblically it does not have a kinyan. It doesn't have das. And the kedushin of a cheresh is not valid. So although really over here they were engaged before he became deaf, so technically that was a valid kinyan. And go ahead, so now do chuppah, and she'll be able to eat truma. No, she cannot eat truma because gazru nisuah cheresh atu kedusha cheresh. They will let them do it by nisuah. They might do it by kedusha too, which that's not valid for her to be able to eat truma. So therefore, she can't eat even in such a case. Now, what's with mace? What happens if this cheresh, who again, he cannot feed his wife truma, again, gazru nisuah cheresh atu kedusha cheresh, he dies after he gets married to her. And then the nafel of yavam cheresh. And now actually his brother also had this condition. His brother was a deaf mute, and she falls for yibum in front of the yavam that's a cheresh. So actually, like chelas, she actually will eat truma, because, as Rashi explains, the bia of a cheresh is not less than the bia of shogeg, or of znus, or of einus, all those cases that we included in our opening Mishnah here, Bal Yevimtai, where they're not intending to be koina, and still the Torah says that that's included in the bia of Yevamos Daf for the yavam. Okay, so cheresh who doesn't have das, there's no less. I mean, you could say maybe because a lot of bar das, but that's how Rashi explained that it's the same thing. That there's no das, you don't need a das for kinyan, and it's going to work. And says the Bryce, in this case, you see that the strength of the Yavam is more than the strength of the Baal. You see that the husband who's a Chedesh couldn't feed his wife, but the Yavam that's a Chedesh could feed it because it's a Bia Grua, and the Torah included Bia Grua for the mitzvah of Yibum. So the Gemara asks, Bishlim Rav, we understand according to Rav that he says that a Bia Grua, this inferior Bia of a Chedesh or Shoygig and a Mazid, he said as we started off the Yomid, that you kinda, for everything, including feeding Truma, which is not explicit in the Parsha, so Nicha makes sense. That we're saying that the Yavam could feed Truma. El Shmuel Kasha, according to Shmuel, it's difficult. Because here, the first husband was not feeding when they were only engaged before he became deaf. And yet now, by the Yavam, he is feeding. Didn't you tell me Shmuel is l'shitosai, whatever the Baal could be machal, the Yavam could, whatever the Baal cannot be machal, the Yavam cannot? And we said that means a Bia Grua, and the Chedesh is intrinsically a Bia Grua. So how, according to Shmuel, could the Yavam be feeding Truma if the husband couldn't? Shmuel would tell you, Emahachi. No, you have to read it differently. He amends the Brisa. The Brisa should be read like this. If the regular woman to a regular Kohen got engaged, and then the Brisa said, well, his particular Kohen said they didn't get a chance to get married, Ad Shenis Chadash, and the Kohen, when he was engaged, he became deaf. So she doesn't eat Truma. Now, this is where he amends the words. But he makes up a new case. He says, let's say they got married, and only then, after they were married, then the husband became a chedesh. Oh, then the chedesh shall continue eating because there was no invalid nisuin over here. When they got married, he was still safe. A year into the chasna, he became a chedesh. Okay, then she'll eat. And that's the case when we said, Maze, if let's say the husband died after he was already married and then he became deaf, and then she falls under the Yavam that's chedesh, oh, a chedesh, she'll eat. That's mamash like Shmuel said, because she was eating by the first husband, so then she'll eat by the Yavam. That's not a problem. But then the question says to Gemara, wait, am I bezu? The Brisa said, bezu, yofim koyach, ha-yavam b'koyach abal. What type of yibur koyach is there by the Yavam? What do you mean? The husband was also feeding her when he was a chedesh. Why is this making the Yavam stronger than the husband? So the Gemara explains. The ilu baal, whereas by the husband, chedesh me'ikara, had he been an original deaf mute before he married her, the halacha would have been lo echel, she would not have eaten the ilu Yavam, but by the Yavam, chedesh me'ikara achla. Even though he was originally a deaf mute, she is eating. You're right, it's because the husband was machal, so he's going to continue being machal. But had the husband been chedesh meikara, it wouldn't have been like that. But Yavam, even though he is chedesh meikara, he could, because the husband was feeding, but he could be a chedesh meikara. So it's regarding that Yafa Koyach Yavam Koyach Abal, but it's not that we're talking about that he was, we originally read the Brisa in its unedited version, that it was the case of the Reisha where the husband was not feeding. Because if the husband was not feeding, Shmuel would say that no, Yavam wouldn't be able to feed because it's a Bia Psula, and Bia Psula cannot make it better than what was by the husband. That's one version, that's version number one. Vikadam, and let's say a second version is Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. That no, actually Mina Edison from engagement, which in the first version Rav was saying yes, it's going to work for everything, even for Truma. No, it's not true. In this version, everyone agrees that the woman not eat Truma because she was not even eating when the husband was alive. The Yavam with his Bia Grua is not going to make it better than the husband. This is from marriage, meaning if she was married to the first husband, which in the first version we had it, that everyone agreed that she's going to eat Truma because she was eating already when she was married, so she would eat now. No, in this version it's a machlekes. Rav Amar says, yeah, she's going to eat because she was eating by her first husband. And now with this Bia, she'll come right back to it because the Torah is including that the Bia Grua, B'shegeg, Ba'inus, B'notz, and all those B'mezin, that it's just like it has halach of a Yibum, so she'll continue eating. Shmuel says, no, in this version it says, Enoch Chelas. She's not going to eat Truma even though her first husband she was married to. Because when does the Torah include that a mistaken bia is like that of deliberate only those things that you said there in the parsha of Yevamos Daf, which is where we learn out this halacha from. But for all things, like let's say the wife of a kohen who is yavam for arti truma, for that we don't necessarily say that it's going to be considered as a bia until he has a gemara bia with das and kinyan, and up until that point it's not going to work. It's going to work for Yerusha, it's going to work for other things, but it won't work for the husband feeding, this yavam feeding truma. Says the Gemara, how could you say this? How could Shmuel be quoted as saying that even if she ate by the first husband from the Nesuin, but the bia gru the yavam is not going to feed you, but Shmuel himself, as was said, kol shabal machal, wherever the husband feeds, which was when she was married to the first husband, yavam machal, the yavam will feed, even by a bia grua. So how can you tell me, Shmuel, that you're not going to feed in this case? Says the Gemara, Amos say no. You have to retranslate that teaching of Rav Nachman and Shmuel. What does it mean, kol shabal machal, yavam machal? It means kol bia shahabal machal ba. Any type of bia that the husband would feed through that type of bia. I mean, it's not going on a actual case. It's talking about conceptual. Any bia, like Rashi says, for example, the bia is chuppah, meaning when you have a bia by the chuppah, which is for the purposes of nisuin, that the halacha is that the husband would feed through that because he would be getting married with that. That's yavam machal, but the yavam could feed with. But v'chol bia she'in abal machal, but any bia that the husband would not feed with it, which is this, like like a bia grua. If it was not for the purposes of marriage, the yavam also would not feed with it, and therefore the yavam is not going to be able to feed with this bia grua, even if she was eating by the first husband. Shmuel didn't mean to say, oh, whenever the baal was machal, then in that same exact case the yavam is going to be machal. No, she could have been eating by the husband. But the yavam is not going to be able to, because it means a type of bia that the husband would feed with, then the yavam would feed with. But a type that wouldn't, like a bia grua, so then bia grua, you have to know what would be by the husband. But the point is that wouldn't necessarily prove this point of if she was eating, then she'll continue eating, because it just means a type of a bia, like bia's chuppah, then she will eat. But if not, then she will not eat. But basically, the Gemara asks on Shmuel from the following brisa, which we quoted before. Now we're in the second version. Bas Yisrael Pakachas, a regular Jewish woman that's healthy, that gets engaged to a regular healthy kohen. But the problem is doesn't get a chance to do the chuppah, and then he becomes a chedesh. So halacha is, as we mentioned this already before, in the chedesh she's not going to eat truma from this man that she's going to marry as a chedesh. Mace, if let's say he dies, the nafel of yavam chedesh and she falls in front of the yavam, that's a chedesh. She will eat truma. We already quoted this brayso before. This we see the strength of the yavam is in this case, this element is stronger than that of the husband. So the Gemara says as follows: we understand according to Rav. What do you mean we understand according to Rav? So Rashi explains. Although this brayso is difficult to Rav, because the brayso is saying that the woman's going to eat, even though she was not eating, because again, the original reading, unedited version of this brayso has it as one long case, where she wasn't eating by the first husband, because before they got married, he became a chedesh, and then they get married, and she never eats truma, and then she falls for eating, and even though the yom is also chedesh, she's going to eat. Now that's difficult on Rav, because Rav was only saying in the second version that if she was married to the first husband, she was eating, then she'll eat by the yavam. He was saying even not like that, and it's essentially like the case of falling from Edison, where we had said even according to Rav that she's not going to eat. So that says, okay, fine, but Matarat at least Kedatar to Mikol, we'll be able to answer like we answered originally in the first version, according to Shmuel. That we said, there's words missing from the Bryce, and you have to read it. That no, if she got married and then her first husband became a chedesh, then she eats by that first husband, and then he dies and she falls in front of the yavam, who's a chedesh, she's going to eat because she was eating from before. I could understand that you'll be able to answer like that. Now, Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, in this second version, that even if she's eating in her husband's lifetime, she's not going to eat because of the yavam would be a grua or kasha, because the bia of a chedesh is like the bia of a shegi and einis without intent of a kinyan, and she eats. Says kasha. You're right. According to the second version of Shmuel, it's difficult. You don't really ever have a case of that the yavam will be able to feed with a bia grua, and the chedesh is always intrinsic of bia grua. So it's difficult according to Shmuel. How do you understand this brayso? So the Gemara continues on this topic. What we had mentioned is brayso tona bam. Bas Yisrael Bakachas, a healthy Jewish woman, Shenazar Kohen Bekeh, gets engaged to a healthy kohen. and he doesn't get a chance to get married until he becomes a chadash. So this part we quoted already from the previous brisa. She's not going to eat, as we mentioned, but now the brisa mentions a new element. What happens? Okay, she's married to this chadash. She's not able to eat again because we're goyzer nesuri chadash otu kedushi chadash. But then she has a child from this chadash. So Eichela says the brisa interestingly. Now she actually will be able to eat truma with the birth of a son. Why? Because of her son. Because the pasuk says in Yekach Beis, when a person has children, they're going to eat his bread. The Gemara in Nida Daf Memdal says that you don't read it Yoichlu Balachma, you read it Yachilu Balachma. The children actually cause that the mother should be able to eat truma. So it's because of her child that now she can eat truma, not because of her husband. So although she couldn't eat because of her husband, now because of the child, she could eat. Now, what happens if Mesa Ben? What happens if the child dies, but the father's still alive? So here we actually have a machlokes. He says that the woman will continue to eat truma because of her husband, and the Chachamim they say she'll not be able to eat. Now the Gemara wonders, my time of Nas, what's the reason of Nas? The whole rech you had, the whole right you had to eat was because of the son. Now the son's not alive anymore. So why would Rav Nosson hold that you could eat truma? Somebody else says, since she had already been eating anyway, and the husband's still alive, she's married to a kohen, and she was eating because of the child, so she continued eating truma. Amalai says to Rabbi, he says, if that's the case, I'll ask you the following case. Bas Yisrael, and this is a kohen, a regular case, a regular Jew, Bas Yisrael, the daughter of Yisrael, that gets married to a kohen, umisle, and the husband dies without any children. Teichel, she should continue eating because probably she already ate. We know that's not the case. Because Elikim in the Misle, once the husband dies, Pakale Kedusha Semina. So his Kedusha is removed from his wife, where she's not married to him anymore. So Achalam, it was given the Misle, since the son died, which that was her whole right that she was coming from, Pakale Kedusha Semina. So that Kedusha is removed from her. How can you say because she ate because of her son, she continues to eat, the son's not alive anymore? So Elam Rav Yisrael, rather Rav Yisrael has a different shot. So Ksab Rav Nosson, he says like this. Rav Nosson holds, and we mentioned this in passing before, Nisui Chedesh. When, let's say she was engaged to the husband when he was a Bikech, but then, when they got married, he was already a Chedesh. The truth is, Machilin Betruma. Biblically, the moment they get engaged, really, she's supposed to be eating Truma. Because the pasuk says, "V'koyin ki yikne nefesh." When the kohen is going to acquire someone kinyan kasplei, who the halacha is, the kinyan, it's already a kinyan. The woman, when she's engaged, really is supposed to eat truma right away. Then it's only a rabbinic decree that they don't let a engaged kala eat truma until she comes to the chuppah, because of a gzeira that maybe the chassan is in love with his kala. He's going to send her a kais of truma when she's in her father's household. Now the brothers, they crowd on the kala. What did your chassan, the kohen, give you? She said, like, he gave me this delicious drink, and she would give it to her brothers and to her sisters to drink. As the Gemara says in Sumah Daf Nun Zayin, which is problematic because she's allowed to eat because she's engaged to Goyim. Her siblings are non-Kahanim; they're forbidden with a biblical commandment not to eat truma. Now, so therefore, since this situation, at the time of the kinyan, he was a bendas, and now they're coming to the chuppah. So that says Rav Nosson that we're not geyser anymore, shemetashka. We're not concerned that she's going to come to feed to her siblings because she already came to the chuppah. Oh, so therefore she could eat truma, and we're not geyser the marriage of a cherish because of the kedushin of the cherish, which kedushin of a cherish, which says he cannot make a kinyan. The sur cherish is not dependent on the kinyan. Oh, so therefore that's the understanding of Reb Nosson. Whereas, as Rashi explains, the Rabbanon, they say it's forbidden because they are guys in the marriage of a cherish who, even though he was a bardas when he did the kedushin, because we might allow it by kedushin when he's a cherish, which again, that's not about kinyan, and then even biblically she's not going to eat truma. So that is the machlekes between Reb Nosson and the Chachamim regarding this case, if the woman is going to be oicheles or not, if we hold Gaz Nesui Cheresh Ati Kedusha Cheresh. But says the Gemara, wait a second. I'm like, why is there difficulty with this interpretation of Yosef too? It says, if that's the case, then Noilid La Ben, you told me the whole case was, she didn't eat Truma because her husband was a Cheresh when they got married. But then when she has a child, she'll eat. And everyone agrees to that. And we wanted to know, when the son dies, what's the halacha? But Nassim says, you can continue eating. Chum says, no, you cannot eat. Chum we understand, because she only ate because of the son. No more son, no more eating. Nassim says, no, you continue eating. You're telling me the reason is why? Oh, because really we're not guys in the Surah Cheresh to Kedusha Cheresh. So what are you talking about being born upon Lamali? What do you need that for? Without a son, also she would eat a Karja Nassim. Because you're not guys in the Surah Cheresh to Kedusha Cheresh. So says the Gemara, you're right. Mishum Rabbanan. The only reason why we spoke about a child being born was just telling us that according to the Rabbanan, they agree when there's a son, although they hold that a Nesui B'Cheresh is not going to work, but if she has a son, they can eat because of the son. So the Gemara says, no, this doesn't make sense. Because L'lifli Reb Nosson alai b'reisha, then why did Reb Nosson disagree with them in the reisha? Even a bigger chiddush. Why are you waiting for the case of when the son dies? Even without a son, Reb Nosson should have said, when there's Nesui Cheresh, the Chacham said, no, she cannot eat. Reb Nosson should have jumped in there in the beginning, said, no, I hold even if there's no son, just even Nesui Cheresh, she could eat because not Geyser or the Kedusha Cheresh. So the Gemara says that's not difficult. Because he waited for the Rabbanan until they finished their teachings, and then he disagreed with them. In other words, as Rashi explained, when Reb Nosson says Oicheles she could eat, it's not going only on the Sefer. It's going on the whole teaching of the Chacham, both on the Sefer when the son dies, and even on the Reisha before they even had a son, which Rabbanan said they could not eat. Reb Nosson held no that they could eat. The problem, says the Gemara, if that's the case, Reb Nosson is also disagreeing on the Reisha. He's just waiting for the Rabbanan to finish their teachings. It doesn't really, if you look at the wordings of the Brisa, says the Gemara that's difficult. Because listening, you should have said, Mesa ben, you should have said the whole words of the Chachamim first. You should have said, Mesa ben, if the son dies, Eino Eicheles, which that would have been all the words of Rabbanan, and then it would have said, Reb Nosson Eino Eicheles, which Reb Nosson would have been disagreeing the whole thing. But now, if you look at the wordings of the Brisa, what's the wordings of the Brisa? It says, Mesa ben Reb Nosson Eino Eicheles, Chachamim Eino Eicheles. It's not, you shouldn't say that. If you're saying the whole teaching of Rabbanan, the Chachamim should have said their teaching, finished, and Nosson should have said, I'm disagreeing with the whole thing. Now it sounds like that he didn't just wait for the thing, that it sounds like he's only disagreeing on the case of Mesa ben, and not on also the Reish. That's definitely a difficulty on this interpretation of Rabbi Yosef that holds that he's disagreeing on everything. Then why do you say Reb Nosson and then Chacham Ma'imim should have just said the whole teaching of Chacham, and Reb Nosson would have been disagreeing on everything? That's a difficulty. In the Halacha and Mishnah, we said that we had mentioned this halacha that ben b'shagi ben ma'ayin is a wicked harav gmarbi. It's all the same thing, and we said the same thing is also when you have intimacy with one of the forbidden relationships. It's also going to be the same thing. Now, related to this teaching, Omer Avam, he says, "Hamilsa Amalam Rav Sheshes." Rav Sheshes told the following teaching as we continue to the days. Vanirinu la'aynin mimasnitin, and he illuminated our eyes from our Mishnah. Meaning, from our Mishnah, he brought a raya to his words, and he illuminated our eyes in understanding the Mishnah. What was the teaching of Rav Sheshes? He said, Eishes Yisrael Shenetzah, regarding the wife of a Yisrael, if she got raped, if she got violated. So the halacha is, although she's permitted to her husband, and that's a pasuk in Midbar Hey, where it says, V'hi loy nitzvasa. It says if the woman was not forced, then she's forbidden to her husband. Then she's forbidden. It sounds like, but if she was forced, then she's going to be permitted. Now, but in spite of that, psulo lekuhuna. She's going to be invalid for kuhuna. What do you mean invalid for kuhuna? Meaning, if her husband subsequently dies, she's not allowed to go ahead and marry a kohen. Now, but Tana Tuna, and the Tana of our Brisa, of our Mishnah, it says the same idea. Where do you see this? Because it says in the Brisa, in our Mishnah, we said the same halacha applies of all these bees geruas if one has intimacy with one of the rayas or with one of those that are possible. Says the Gemara, what does it mean and also? Meaning, what was the b'chein going on? My love, isn't it saying, yeah, all those things that we said by the Yevamos, Loishna b'shoyu doesn't make a difference if it's in error. Loishna b'beis doesn't make a difference if it's sinful intent. But Loishna b'oinus, that's the main case we want to have, doesn't make a difference if it's coerced. Loishna b'ratzon doesn't make a difference if it's willingly. Meaning, and Ukatani, we learned that if someone has to be with one of these arayas, the halacha is going to be possible, it's going to validate her for kahuna. Now, one of the arayas is Eishes Ish. So we see a married woman to a Yisrael, that the bia of the erva, even if it's ba'onis, is going to make her puzzle for kahuna. So you see, this teaching of Rav Shloimy is illuminated from our Mishnah. Says no, it's not a right from our Mishnah. My b'chein, what does the Mishnah mean when it says and also? It's not going on all these bia psulas of, let's say, ba'onis. It's going on a harja. We had really two different categories that we were saying are good by yibum. Shagig, mezid, oinis, ras. And we also had, not in, let's say, what type of bia it is, but how much of the bia. Not qualitative, but quantitative. That it's enough, even with just harja. It doesn't have to be gemar bia. But we're talking about where the hara was berotzen, where that makes her a zayin. That's what we're saying is going to be the chayin with all the arayis. But it's not true. If a woman was nenas, she does not become puzzle for kahuna. But the Gemara says, wait a second. Hara dema. Which hara are you including when you're saying the chayin to tell us is the same as by yibum? Ilim adarayis, if you think it's regarding arayis, how can you say that? That doesn't really make sense. Why not? Because remember, is that to say that arayis alfinim b'yavama? Did we learn out arayis from Yevamos? That's what it sounds like with the Mishnah. But chayin, that was saying the same halacha we say by yibum, we're going to say by arayis. And you're telling me it's going hara, not on the case of oinis. But Adrabah, to the contrary, Yevamos alfinim arayis. It's punkt fakir. We know the halacha of hara by yibum from the arayis, because if you remember from a previous stop we had said by chiv alavin it says bia, and it says bia by yibum, and that's how we know the whole halacha of hara. The ikar hara, because the primary hara is actually by arayis, it actually says by the parsha of nida, and we learn out chiv alavin from the chiva arayis. So how could you say in our Mishnah we're comparing it to Yevamos as if we're learning it from Yevamos when Yevamos is actually learned out from that of arayis? So the Rebbe says the Gemara, no, I'll tell you a different shot. My b'chem, what does the Mishnah mean? And also, it's actually going ashaloi kadarka da arayis. It's going on when the relations was in an unnatural way, which by Yevamos we said we were not machalik bin bi labia, meaning we said the halacha of yibum is going to be whether kadarka or shaloi kadarka, and that's what the Mishnah is saying. And b'chem ba'alachas b'kol arayis that the Torah made her apostle for kahuna because she's a zayna, but it's done b'ratzin, is because we learn out bia from Yevamos, where over there it says ulakacha, where it says to take the Yevamos. It already says Yevamos. What's the kacha? Which the Gemara previously it said shaloi kedarka. That's what we're saying, that shaloi kedarka is going to have the same halacha by arayis. To the contrary, ikar mishka beisha, the primary halacha that we know that there's a conceptual idea that to even would be considered bia shaloi kedarka, which is the pluralistic terminology of mishka beisha. There's many different ways to lay with a woman. Is by arayis. L'kacha comes to include by yibum. We also say from the extra l'kacha, we would never have known that there is such a concept of being chayiv as considering a bia, if not for that, and it says by right. So don't tell me about right from yibum. Still, rather says imamay b'chein. So what does the Mishnah mean b'chein? It's still trying to find that it wouldn't support Rav Shloimy. We can interpret b'chein to something else. Ashloi kedarka dechiv alavin, which Rashi explains. Taisus discusses this. But let's say but that alman l'kohen gadol and grusha b'chulus l'kohen hedi, where there it doesn't say mishka be'isha. By those chiv alavin, that's what we're coming to say. You'd be chayiv even shaloi kedarka. It would make her puzzle. But for hara, Rashi says that we didn't need to tell you because that already we know hara chiv alavin kicha from arayis. But for shaloi kedarka, that's what we're coming to say b'chein. But again, it's not a right or obsheshes from our Mishnah. Now, similarly, another related halacha, Amar Rabba or Rabba, Eishes kohen shenensa. If the wife of a kohen, she was violated by another man. So, her husband, if he would continue to be intimate with his wife, he'd get lashes for having relations with his zayna. Why? The Torah says, now, generally, a zayna means to say a woman who committed adultery when she was married to her husband, which she strayed from after her husband. That's really what the word zayna means. It means to stray. To go with a foreign man. Now this woman, although she was raped, but by a kohen, the Torah does not differentiate between if it's ba'onis or b'ratzon, as the Gemara learns out from v'hila nitfasa. When we say v'hila nitfasa, that the woman was not forced, then she's permitted. The word he is a mir, which sounds like only by Eshes Yisrael. Then you say there's a difference between if she was forced or not. But an Eshes kohen, it doesn't make a difference if she was forced or not. So therefore, she's considered zayna, just like as if she did baratzin, because it doesn't make a difference by Isha's kohen. And then the husband gets lashes for having a relation with his zayna. It says zayna in only because of zayna mishum tuma loy, but for tuma not. Meaning the Gemara says in the first paragraph of Yud Alpha Beis that what do I do with the extra words, although it's talking about the Mavzik Yerushalayim over there, but it says Achei Shatama. What do you mean after she became Tami? That includes a Saita that had Bia, that the Torah tells us, La Yuchel Bala, that means to say that the first husband cannot take her back, meaning her current husband, that there's a problem about Tumah. So why doesn't he get lashes for Achei Shatama too? So I think, well, you're right. Aim must say that Af Mishum Zaina. That is not only for Tumah, but also because then she's considered as a Zaina, as an Eshes Kain, because this doesn't make a difference with Ratzon or Ba'inus. But of course, we know that of Tumah. But Moshe Zir asked on Rabbah from the following Brisa. Brisa says, we know the Torah says if the woman was not forced, then she's not held liable. I mean, if she was not forced, that's when the Torah says Asur, she's forbidden to her husband. If she was grabbed, she's going to be permitted. Now, again, like we said, the word Vihi sounds like that it's excluding. V'yeshlach ha'cheres is another woman. Although she was grabbed, Asur, she's going to be forbidden. Which one is that? That's the wife of a kohen. Now the problem is, we know whenever there's a negative provision that's a derivation of a positive, and say there's no lashes. How do you say that you get lashes for Zaina? What do you mean? It's only a derivation of Vihila Mitzvasa, which is in saying in a positive way that this woman's permitted. The inference is there's another woman, even though she was forced, but that's a lava b'machal. How do you get lashes? That's considered as a aseh, which you don't get lashes for. So Amar Rabbi has an interesting lumdus. He says like this. He says, Hakol, all the women that have bia when they're still married with their husband, whether forcibly, whether willingly, the truth is, they're all really included in the Torah's negative prohibition of zayin leikach, don't take a zayin. Because ultimately they had bia that was adulterous bia. It doesn't make it willingly or not. Oh, you had bia with another man. Now, when the Torah specified by the wife of a non-kohen, it says if she was not grabbed, then asur she's forbidden. But the diak is if she was grabbed, she's permitted. So the pasuk is excluding the Eishes Yisrael. If she was anusa, she's not including the cloud of zayin leikach. But machlad, the inference is the Eishes Kohen, the wife of a kohen, she retains the original isra of zayin leikach. So it's a very lumdish way of explaining what is the lav of zayin leikach that actually it is all encompassing. By the Eish Yisrael, it's actually mean to say she doesn't have it. But the Eish Yisrael remains with that. It's not from a lav of B'machal. It is the original lav of zayin leikach. That's one version. Another version says the Gemara, those that say, Omar Rabbi says, Eish Yisrael Shenensa, the wife of a kohen was violated. The husband's going to get lashes because it says Achri Asher Torah, that it said it comes to include a Seder Shenyevala. He's going to get lashes for being intimate with this woman, which is his wife. Now the inference is, and this is actually parenthetical in this version, Mishum Tumah in. It's only because of Tumah, but Mishum Zayin Eloi, this version actually holds that actually you're not going to get the lashes for Zayin. Almost, so we see that this version held, Ba'anis Loi Karina Be Zayin. A different one. No, actually Zayin is only when she's straying. If she was violent, there's no straying. It's not a din in having a bia. And according to this version, you're not going to get lashes for Zayin. But Moshe Rabbi Zera asked from that Bryce we mentioned before. It says she was not grabbed, so then she's forbidden. No, if she was grabbed, she's permitted. Now we said the dik of the behis, but yes, there's another woman. Shav bishon nitfasa, so even though she was grabbed, she's going to be forbidden. Which one is this Zuation going to wife of a kohen? But a lot of b'machal say in this version it's asking on even that of tumah. Why are you getting lashes for tumah? But it's a derivation from a positive commandment. So here also a similar answer on a Rabba or it's Rabba. Hakol hayu b'chlav. Everyone was included acher asher tamah. After that she was tameh, which that says a law of taking back such a woman. Now, the Torah tells you, specifies by the wife of a Yisrael. If she was not grabbed, that's she's forbidden. If she was grabbed, she's permitted. The wife of Kohen, she remains as she originally was, which is a law for that of Tumah. Now we continue with the halacha of the next Mishnah, which it continues on, just like we had in the previous Mishnah, opening of this paragraph, Bia Psula, it's Paisel. Here we're going to talk about the Kedushin of a Paisel, how that goes and relates to the woman. It says the Mishnah, when we have a widow to a Kohen Gadol who they're forbidden to get married, and Grusha B'Chalutza Kohen Hedjud, or divorcee, or Chalutza to Kohen Hedjud. So Minna Ederson, the moment they only got engaged, but that's a sinful engagement, Lo Yoichlu B'Truma, they cannot eat Truma, which means, say, there's two versions of Rashi, but Rashi says that they become invalidated from eating Truma. Let's say she's a Bas Kohen, where Rashi says, a place to discuss this, it's also by Bas Yisrael, but if she's the Bas Kohen, the moment where Bas Kohen can eat Truma, the moment she gets engaged to this, puzzle to her, she's not allowed to eat Truma. But Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Machshim, they disagree. They say no, she's kosher until she actually has bia with the Kohen Gadol with the Kohen. then she would become a chalala, like it says lo yichal, which we mentioned a few times during this Masechta. It's that plural, yichalel, is 2 chilulim, one's for the children and one is for her. So the according to the first version, the Gemara says in Subas Abnan Zayin Ben Aleph, that what's called Higiyas Man like this. So let's say they were engaged. And the time that they made up for the chasna came along, they didn't get married yet. The halacha is she eats from his food and she even eats truma. And her mayor is saying, but Amalika and Gadol, even though that it's a valid kedushin and it's kinyan kasboy, she cannot eat truma like all other engaged women to a kind that eat in that Torah. Why? Because this is what's called mishtameres lebiyas aver. She's anticipating a sinful bia that where she's going to become a halal the moment they get married and they have bia. Like Rabbi Shimon hold this kosher because it's kinyan kasboy. I halala. As long as she didn't have bia, she did not become a halal. That's the machlekes in this Mishnah. Now another case. Continues the Mishnah. Let's say this kohen that she was engaged to, she became an almana, or she became a divorcee. So it depends. If let's say she ultimately she got married, then pesulas, then she's possible because already she became a halal when they had bia. So she's a possible. She's not going to eat truma. But when the edison she was only engaged, Ksheres and Rashi explains. Even contra Meir, who said that when they're engaged she cannot eat truma the moment they get engaged, even he agrees that's only when they're alive, when they're engaged. Where she's mishtameres lebi psula. That's the invalidation. She's waiting for bi psula. But once he dies, then she's not invalidated because she never became a halal, never had bi psula, and she's not mishtameres lebi psula because he's dead. So even May would agree that she would be able to eat truma. Now, Tanya learned the Brisa, just to say the first part of it here. Amar May says Kabo Chaim explains his opinion why she's going to be puzzled because he's the Tanakama. He says Umar kedusha reshus. If a voluntary kedushin, meaning when the Yisrael gets engaged to a bas kohen, where there's no sin in that aver, ein machilin. In other words, we don't let her eat truma, as the Mishnah teaches later on Daf Samach Zayin Beis that erisin already invalidates the bas kohen from eating truma. So kedusha there, so sinful kedushin like this, where it's a monika and gadol, kedusha isn't a kamal for sure when they get engaged, should not be able to eat truma. So they say to him, no. If you say by this voluntary, this volitional kedushin of a bas kohen to Yisrael, shekin ein loy lachacham makom acher. That zar, that non-kohen never feeds in any situation. So yeah, when they get engaged, not going to be able to feed her. But what are you going to say by this sinful kedushin? But shekin yesh loy, this kohen, he has the ability to feed in another situation when it is appropriate to him, and therefore here also where she didn't become a halal yet, they don't hold this rubbish, and therefore the halach would be they hold that's not true. They would be able to eat in this case of Amalek Gadol, and it wouldn't be a problem of eating true. Anytime.